Sergej, I'm very happy that you are today again here with us. I would like to talk to you, with you, about the situation in Russia. A lot of things have changed. You are the director of Sacharow-Zentrums and Radio Sacharow, which is one of the very few still liberal outlets from Russia. And the first thing I'm interested in, what is the general situation in Russia? I mean, every day we get bad news and even worse news, and it's still getting worse. But how is the situation in Russia? What is it like? I guess today is spring. It's also spring in Russia, in Moscow.
Hello, David. First of all, thank you for the invitation and for this new hour conversation. If I will try to describe the situation in Russia with one word, this word will be fear. Because the atmosphere of fear is everywhere. Several days ago, we asked our expert. She is the long-time school teacher, to describe the situation in schools, because maybe if you know, since the beginning of the war, there were such a special propaganda lessons in school, and we talked with her about how it is to be a teacher now, and how teachers in Russian schools try not to spread this military atmosphere. And after the very good, very interesting conversation in 2 days, she called us back and asked to take her interview off, because she received numerous of calls from her relatives, from her friends, who told her, "Don't you understand? You will be arrested. It's absolutely dangerous to speak with some media project which is abroad," and so on. And we had to do what she asked. And it is, in my opinion, the picture of the today's situation, and the level of repressions is becoming higher and higher, unfortunately. And authorities started to sentence people who expressed their protest against the war in words, not in demonstrations, with the sentences of 5, 6, 7 years of prison. And several days ago, the prosecutor asked to sentence Vladimir Karmuza, prominent Russian political activist, to 25 years of prison. It is exactly like Stalin's era sentences.
What I think there's a lot of things around that. When you arrived here in Germany, we were joking about Russia is becoming the second North Korea, and right now it seems so. What is it? Can you compare to North Korea? Is it that people are just shocked by this repression, or what is it like?
Today, a lot of experts say that Russia is becoming something like a symbiosis between North Korea and Iran, because from the political point of view, it is becoming closer and closer to North Korea. But of course, if we are speaking about economical life or social life, of course, it is more free than in North Korea today, but it is very closer to China or Iran. And today, Russian parliament adopted a law that if you receive an order to the army and didn't take it, as millions of Russian men did during the first wave of the mobilization. You will be prohibited to sell your property, to rent an apartment, to go abroad, of course, and to register as a person who want to work on himself. So it's a kind of Soviet kolkhozes or something like that, when you are not free to build your own life as you want. And of course, people are shocked, and everybody know about the repressions, the possibility to be charged because of your post in internet, or even because of and some post of some other people.
A couple of years ago, it seems to be so long ago, but it's just like 2 years ago, maybe, or 1.5 years ago. Russia seemed to be a very vivid country with a huge art scene, with a huge community of people who wanted to change the country, who were politically active. A lot of liberal-minded people, especially in Moscow and St. Petersburg and the bigger cities. What happened to them?
Two things. On the one hand, hundreds of culture people and scientists left Russia to numerous of places like Europe, like United States, Central Asia, and so on. And there are in today's Russia such practice as it was in Soviet time, when you see the announcement of the theater play, for example, and there is no director because he said something against the war. And the administration of the theater, if it wants to continue to show this play, it has to dismiss the name of the director, for example. But on the other hand, the theaters are overcrowded, because people want to go away from this militarized atmosphere, and they are watching very with the great attention to the place, looking for every phrases, every words which describes something of their real life, which contains some ideas against the war. So on the one hand, the cultural life is very active, but on the other, it's not the same as it was 2 years before, for example. And on the other hand, there are several underground partisan art projects against the war. And young people who risk their freedom, they are making performances and some actions against the war. They photoed it or filmed them and show to everybody via social nets.
What I find very interesting is that especially in the bigger cities in Russia, there was a lifestyle which was quite modern, more or less. I mean, it was like in every other city I know of. There were cafes, there were bars, and even when this Mr. Tatarsky was blown up, the coffee shop where the explosion happened, where he was killed, it was a more or less Western style coffee, and it was owned by Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner mercenaries. And how does it come together that there's on the one hand a kind of lifestyle, more or less open-minded and modern, on the other hand a movement that is more to the 30s in Russia? I mean, this has got to fit in one head, you know.
As I could understand from my conversations with my friends and colleagues who are in Russia now, this life is still there with young people who gathered together and drink and play and listen music and so on. But at the same time, the atmosphere in the city is very depressed, and the level of risks, even in this sphere of life, became higher, because maybe 2 weeks ago, a police group entered one of the bars, and they laid people down to the floor and beat several of them, and cried that they took all of them and sent them to the war, and something like that. And that is, I couldn't imagine the things like that even a year before. So on the one hand, you can continue the life as it was before, with coffee, with bars, and so on. But your risks to be beaten by police, to be captured and sent to the war, and to be and to find yourself in the middle of some terroristic action, for example, it became much higher than it was.
There were, over the last months, year, right now, a lot of war crimes. And what is strange to me, that they become more, so to say, barbaric. I mean, just yesterday, a man was beheaded by a knife. There were people beaten to death by a hammer. I mean, it's medieval. It seems to be medieval. But what does something like this make to society? I mean, people in Russia also see these pictures. People are returning from war home. They bring back these violent pictures. They survived this violent state of war. What does it make with the society?
I think most part of the society don't see these pictures, these videos. It is very important for anti-war community and pro-war community, because in Russia there is something like 10% of the people who are strictly against the war, and they're not afraid even to say during the polls that they're against the so-called special operation. And maybe another 25-30% who are strictly support the war, and they want this war until the victory. And other 60% of the people try to be far from it, far from the situation. And when they asked, for example, do you want, if the war will stop tomorrow? And they say yes, it will be great. They even could say that they support the special operation, but by this way they show their official loyalty to the authorities. And all these people try to be as far as they can from this information, and they usually tell that they don't want to read and to watch propaganda. And they think that there are two propagandas, one from the side of the state and so-called military correspondents, and on the other from the, as they call it, Ukrainians. And that's always propaganda. We don't want propaganda. We want to be only inside our private life. And speaking about these war crimes, it is important that Evgeny Prigozhin, whom you mentioned, because of this explosion and killing this military correspondent Vladimir Tatarsky, he gathered 50,000 prisoners and sent them to the war. Something about 3/4 of them were already killed. But this last quarter, they are returning home, and their human rights activists monitored this new situation as a guy who was sentenced to prison because he killed somebody 5 years ago. He was at the war, and he came back as a hero. And in 2 weeks, he started to use drugs and made another murder. And so it is something that becoming more and more wide in today's Russia, and these very cruel war crimes. Unfortunately, it isn't something new, because maybe you know that in the same way there was a video how these Wagner warriors killed a guy in Syria in the same cruel way with these hammers and things like that. And very similar things were in Chechnya during First and Second Chechen War. So today the audience, especially European audience, Western audience, receive an opportunity to see it more with more details, and without the opportunity to go on it.
Yeah. This is tough. I mean, is there a way for a healing? Is there something that this situation could all be overcome, that there's some chance for the society to heal from that?
I think that if the Putin's regime will fall, for example, in several months, it won't be very difficult to heal the most of people, because among those who supported the war, the most part of them are very old people of older generation. Among young people, especially in big cities, not only Moscow and St. Petersburg, but Yekaterinburg, Novosibirsk, Tomsk, and others, many of them, half of them, are against the special operation. And if the propaganda will change, the mind of most of Russians will change too. But we will see very difficult problem with military people, with these soldiers, with these policemen, officers, and such guys who are fighting in Wagner and other private armies like that. And in my opinion, the problem of today's Russia is that army, special services, and prison system were not reformed as they had to be. And that will be very important problem.
I can imagine that. I mean, there are people coming home with bullets in their soul, and that will be difficult to hear when you suddenly understand that you committed a big crime and see the scope of what you did to your own society. It's harsh. One thing, when we talk about the resistance, You already said Karamurza is threatened with 25 years in prison. But there are other cases as well. I remember just a couple of weeks ago, there was a case with this young kid, a young girl who just drew something on the wall. Her father was sentenced to, I don't know,
2 years of prison.
Too long in prison. And she was taken away in custody, then returned to her mother she hadn't seen for quite a while. Why is it so? Why do they go after this girl? Why do they go after her father? What is the reason for that?
Because on the one hand, the local authorities are very afraid that somebody upper will decide that they don't do enough to keep their society under the order. So they are becoming more and more cruel. And on the other hand, I think that is new today's repressive policy, because, as I mentioned, the sentences became higher and higher during these last 4 months. In the beginning of the war, people were sentenced to 1 year of prison or 2 years of prison or even fines. But now the sentences became more and more cruel. And the case of Maria Moskaleova, it is not the one such case, and we know about a 15 years boy in Buryatia who was taken off from his mother, and his mother was in prison because her anti-war position, and this boy was taken to the orphan system, and he is there despite of the case of Maria.
Is it that the ruling class or the rulers in Russia have a specific plan for kids? I mean, what is very strange for me is that they kidnapped so many kids from Ukraine, like thousands of them. And this is the reason why now there is a arrest warrant for Putin himself and one of his aides. Why do they go after the kids so often?
2 years ago, they put into the constitution a new article that in Russia the children are something like a value of the country. And on the one hand, it could be understood as the state will do something special for the children, maybe special money for their parents or something like that. But at the same time, that means that our Russian state thinks that the children belongs to it. And so all the children which are under the control of the state belongs to the state. So they take them and try to transform their mind and and to make them Russians instead of Ukrainians. So, and all the new policy which we see after the beginning of the war is the huge part of it. It's about children and young people. These lessons, these patriotic lessons in schools, special courses about the grounds of Russian state, so-called special lectures. In fact, it's a kind of new ideology that Russia is a special civilization with its own values, traditional values, and it is surrounded by the enemies and so on and so on and so on. And I'm not afraid about the young people who is now 18 or 20 or 20 plus, because they formed in previous times with another situation in schools and in universities when they when we had several very European style universities with, for example, gender studies or some new sociological studies and so on. But now all of them destroyed. The professors left Russia or they're fired. And now the educational system in Russia is becoming something like the system of propaganda indoctrination as it was in Soviet time.
I mean, usually, at least in Russia, but also in Germany, when it was the dark times in Germany, it's also a good time for writers. Usually you see some very good work on that, like Animals Farm, for example, or 1984. These were books created by these impression of the totalitarianism. What do you see in Russia coming out of it? Is there anything like an oppositional culture, something where people try to get ideas or values through the times, through these tough times?
I think there is not enough time to see something like new novels like Remarque or somebody like that, but I see the new poetry, the poetry after the war, and there are special new book collections of this anti-war poetry and new plays and performs. And yesterday I and my wife were on such a play here in Berlin with prominent Russian actor Anatoly Belый, who left Russia because of his anti-war position, and he prepared a monoplay about a guy who is a refugee, and he named himself Lot as a Bible character, and he tells his story about his life, and at the same time with dozens of the Davos of Reims, which was created after the beginning of the war. So I think we are seeing the creating of new anti-war culture in Russia. And as I mentioned, it is not only the process abroad. It is the process inside Russia because of a lot of some partisan performances, graffiti, and things like that.
I wanted to talk to you about the closing of the Sacharow Center. You told me that in the next days, weeks, the center will be closed. So it's the end of a story. It's like a circle with Jelena Bonner started it, and now it's coming to an end. Do you think it is an end, or is it just like some strange kind of holiday? So you are off for a couple of weeks and then you can turn back. What is your guess?
Of course, it looks like the end of the epoch, which started during the perestroika, then several very important civic institutions like Sacharow Center and Memorial and Moscow Helsinki Group there started their activity. And this epoch finished because this project, this try of building post-Soviet Russia unfortunately failed. But at the same time, we cannot live without a hope that we will rebuild it after several time, and we unfortunately now we are deconstructing our expositions, our museum, because yes, we will have to leave these venues in a week, but we will keep them, or not only our materials, not only our collections, but our museum expositions. We will keep it to restore it someday, and nobody knows that it could happen, because I was a child in the beginning of 80s, but I remember this atmosphere that Soviet Union will be forever. But after several years, the perestroika started, and after 6 years, that was a collapse of Soviet Union, and we found ourselves in a new state, in a new, absolutely new situation.
This is the hope that never ends, that someday it will change for better. What I think is, if a society had freedom, it's very difficult to take it away, and it's freedom in the end is always the winner, usually. Sometimes it takes a couple of years. When it comes to China, I mean, when we have a look like what is coming next, China was very supportive for Putin. Xi Jinping was in Peking. Afterwards, he said to the Europeans, it wasn't that harsh. Then, they did some stuff. What do you expect from them? Is it something like a threat for Russia? Is it helpful for Russia? Is it maybe even helpful for a restart of Russia? What do you think? Or is it just the first step of the decolonization of Russia?
I think that today Russian authorities understood that the help from China would be much less that they want. And China, of course, supported Russia, especially symbolically, politically. If we are speaking about the words in the United Nations, but China isn't very is not eager to send to Putin some military things and stuff like that. I think that Putin tried to do something very gigantic. He's trying to turn Russia from the west to the east. Russia, of course, isn't a country of Western Europe, of the real democratic West, but it was oriented to the West during hundreds of its history. Russians understand them partly different from the Europeans, but they look on them. They was looking to the Europe, and they receive a lot of knowledge, a lot of techniques, a lot of cultural things from Europe and from the West, and we are bounded with a lot of lines. Not only political or social, but cultural. And I cannot say that Putin couldn't be successful in it, but I think that he will meet a lot of sabotage, a lot of silent resistance against it, especially if they think not about some political decisions, about politics, but about cultural life. Because yes, people in Moscow and in Russia, they continue to drink coffee and whiskey, and not rice vodka, and they continue to eat pizza and not something, I don't know exactly what is special Chinese food, and they continue to watch Hollywood movies. And so on and so on and so on, and I want to believe that he failed in this in this project.
Last question is the atomic clock. Last time we met, you said the chance was around 5% that it all ends with a nuclear war. What is the situation today? Is it less or more?
I think today is something like 4%,
better.
because Russian tactical nuclear weapons are in Belarus today, so it is closer to the Europe, closer to the NATO. But from other point of view, I think that that Putin won't push the red button because of China. On the one hand, the Chinese influence on Russia is bad because it supported Putin, but on the other, it's a kind of red line for him. Because it will influence not only for his to his enemies, but to his to those about whom Putin think that they are his allies.
What is the next step for you, for Sacharow Center in Germany?
We are in several steps from launching Radio Sacharow, and that was the first one, and it is very important not only because it's some new project in exile and important for the Russian diaspora and free-thinking people inside Russia, but for me it is important because in Moscow, Sacharow Center was a venue which was open for numerous of civil initiatives, NGOs, and different experts and so on. And this Radio Sacharow would be something like that, but online. It will be open for numerous of media activists, of media in exile, and experts who will have an opportunity to connect with their audience, but by this new channel. And on the other hand, in additionally to it, we want to establish Sacharow Center here in Germany and to continue our other activity, our educational programs and things like that.
Okay, thank you, Sergej, for today. And I think we will have another chat later. Thank you.
Thank you, David.